Okay, here we go. It is time for Good News in Parks. And before we get started, I just wanted to share with you guys, we have a new mug winner. Congratulations, Jessica. I know everybody loves that mug, so we are super excited for you, and our team will be reaching out so that we know how to get that mug to you. So thank you everybody for joining us, and we are so excited about this episode. It's our first special edition show for season 2, and I can't begin to tell you how thrilled we are. I think we would all love to have a crystal ball, right, to be able to see into the future so that we could predict trends in park and rec and better forecast and plan to serve communities in the ways that are most meaningful. Well, we have put together the crystal ball of panelists today who are going to help us understand the forecast for our field and the top trends we need to pay attention to on a local, national, and world view. And remember, this is your show. So we want to get to as many of your questions as we can while we shape the questions from your survey inputs. We also want to answer as many of your live questions. So please use that Q&A button in your Zoom toolbar throughout the show to ask questions, and we will get to as many of them as we can. All right, so let's get going. I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Jody Adams, who is a stellar trend hunter herself. Jody, I'm literally on the edge of my seat for today's show. What's the good word? And who is this amazing panel that's joined us today?
Well, I tell you, you can imagine I'm off the ceiling today. I'm so excited about this. Oh my gosh, we have wanted these three on our panelists for a long time. And so what a way to kick off again, another great show in January, but for the year. Let me just go ahead and I'll introduce our panelists first, and then we'll come back to national news, which is good news, national news. First, I want to introduce Jayne Miller. Jayne, she is the chair of World Urban Parks, past director of Ann Arbor, Michigan, Minneapolis Park District, and also the Pittsburgh Parks Conservatory. Jayne is also a NACPRO commissioner, Council of Accreditation for Parks and Recreation Agency, and she is a fellow member of the American Academy of Parks and Recreation administrators. So I also want to give a shout out to World Urban Parks CEO Neil McCarthy. What a great guy. What a great administrator, but also the board of World Urban Parks. Jayne, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jody, and thanks, Anne Marie, for having me. I'm really excited to be here today. And with my co-panelists.
Yes, it's wonderful. Kristine Stratton, President, CEO of National Recreation and Park Association. And Kristine is the past executive with Earth Justice, Waterkeepers Alliance, my heart, and the Conservation Law Foundation. And I want to give a big shout out to Michael Kelly, the CEO of NRPA Board of Directors, and also the CEO. He is Chicago Park District. He is Chicago Park District. He has done a great job there. But again, welcome, Kristine, to the show.
Thank you so much. Great to be here with you.
And Jonathan Vlaming, National Association of County Park and Recreation Official Board of Directors. He's the board liaison to the National Association of County Officials. I can tell you right now, Jonathan's busy. He's the Associate Superintendent of Planning, Design, and Technology for Three Rivers Park District, Minnesota. And that is a park district that manages 27,000 acres of nature-based parks, a reserve with over 13 million visitors a year. But here's a shout out to the NACPRO Board of Directors, but also Executive Director Brenda Adams-Wyatt. Oh my gosh, Jonathan, I think that just made me really tired, but welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and with everybody.
Well, let's just get going with national news. So here we go. The National Gold Medal Awards application is open. You want to get this in. If you are even under 30,000, we have several categories and agencies, or over 400,000, please consider looking to apply. It will make your department better, just going through the process even. And also the military installations worldwide, please, again, apply. And then also we'll be recognizing state parks this year. So go ahead, and all the state parks directors, take note, and let's get in there and get you recognized for the excellence in management. That deadline is March 26th. So you can find this information at aapra.org. That is the Academy, American Academy of Parks and Recreation Administrators actual website. It's on the front page, but also you can go to nrpa.org under our work tab, and you can find those awards applications. Also, the national NRPA national awards are on there, and it's for innovation and spotlighting our professionals. And I would not miss that deadline. Those are amazing awards given for innovation. Again, the deadline is March 26th, and you can find that at nrpa.org, our work tab. And then also I want to call your attention to Kristine's message last Friday. Kristine, it was dynamic. It was right to the point, but it also really shared us, where are we going? And I really appreciate you doing this message. It was fantastic. It's on the website. Don't miss it. It will inspire you to get rocking this year. So again, thank you again, Kristine. And also on there, there's a national article about the 30 under 30. It's our future. Oh my gosh. Anne-Marie, you were one of the judges. Michael Bernstein. Oh my gosh, great article. Read about our future. The future's bright, people. We are so fortunate to have these future professionals ahead, because we need them. We need them to run these systems that have been built over decades and actually centuries. So let's go ahead. Also, I want to mention a little bit about funding. Land and Water Conservation Fund is open right now. The deadlines are coming up middle of February on, depending on your state. If you want information on LWCF, you can go to many websites. These organizations have websites that can actually delineate some of the information, but the bottom line is get on it, look up WLCF, you'll see all kinds of different connections to that grant. It's on nrpa.org, it's on the county website, and please don't miss out on those grants. Also, USDA Rural Development, U.S. Department of Agriculture has opened the grant process for the community facilities loan and grant program right now. Don't miss out. We have small departments on this show. You've been asking for this information. It's there for 5,500 and below. If you're that small department, go to usda.gov programs and look at those that information. And then finally, this is a big one, Jayne. You all were out there in front putting this out here of the 2021 Bloomberg Global Mayor Challenge grants. And thank you for getting that information out. That application, you can, if you're at 100,000 and above, go after it. There's going to be 50 cities selected worldwide that are going to receive renowned expert information and advisement on their innovations, but then there's going to be 15 grand prize winners of $1 million. So you don't want to miss it, and don't underestimate yourself. Go to Bloomberg Cities /mayors and challenge. Wow.
Exciting stuff.
Let's move on to the main event. Okay, panelists, here we go. As Parks and Recreation departments and the industry as a whole is planning and fluently moving through 2021, what's the forecast look like for our field of 2021 and beyond? Kristine, please kick us off today.
Great. Well, thank you again for having me on the show. And I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. I will just say I'm going to get to the good news in parks, but first need to really tackle the challenges on the forecast.
Absolutely.
We're all aware of the impact that COVID-19 has made on this field, and that it could prove really damaging unless our park and recreation professionals have a plan at every juncture. So the biggest threat we face, as we know, we faced it during the Great Recession, is a decrease in investment. Budget cuts are widespread among park and recreation agencies. Among respondents to the December NRPA Park Snapshot Survey, 48% of agencies were facing budget cuts to operations as of January 1st, with a typical reduction around 20%. 33% of park and rec agencies were facing cuts to their capital budget as of January 1st, with a typical reduction of 37%. Nearly 4 in 5 agencies have taken cost-cutting steps that impact staffing in response to either reduced operating budgets or, in many cases, a shift of funding to cover COVID-related expenses. So they've taken steps like hiring freezes of full and part-time staff, laying off or furloughing part-time and seasonal staff. And this is a big one, shifting full-time staff into roles that typically are filled by seasonal and part-time staff. Mm-hmm. But we are persevering. And we know that park and trail usage has risen dramatically during the pandemic. For many, parks have been the only outlet during this really challenging time. And our patrons are connecting the dots between their health and wellness and the availability and the quality of these spaces. So this is the time for all of us to really leverage that great need for parks and promote the healing powers that parks offer. So we've got to face it, right? We are in the midst of numerous health crises, from the pandemic to the obesity epidemic, to increases in rates of depression and mental health disorders, to increases in substance use. In fact, the pandemic has exacerbated all of these health crises. We're facing unprecedented challenges in our country, and yet there is no better partner to address all of these than Parks and Recreation. This is a time to reinvent your agency and prove that the Parks and Rec department is essential and needs meaningful investment. We heard at the 2020 NRPA virtual conference, we heard researcher and author Dan Heath talk about upstream solutions. Mm-hmm. Parks and Recreation are the quintessential upstream solution. And if Park and Rec budgets are cut now, the fact is that cities will pay later. So many agencies have positioned themselves as solution providers during the pandemic, working with public health teams, school systems, and other natural partners like libraries to deliver life-saving and life-enhancing services. And our research reflects that over 60% of agencies have delivered critical services to communities during the pandemic. Our professionals should proudly identify and promote their agencies as what we're calling community wellness hubs, a place actively providing access to health and wellness resources, education, engagement, and physical activity. And we know that the pandemic has increased the level of food insecurity in our country. Mm-hmm. So let's make sure that Parks and Rec are part of that web of services that keep our children, our families, our elders really safe and secure. And that Park and Rec community wellness hub model, it combats all the chronic conditions that plague every single community in this country by offering programs and services to keep people moving, to fight social isolation, and to build community cohesion. So we must actively fight for against more devastating cuts and promoting an investment in Parks and Rec as an upstream solution. So an important part of our forecast is really the effort the federal government is going to put into recovery, into infrastructure, into workforce development. With NRPA's legislative agenda, we're focused on maximizing the resources that will go into Park and Rec projects. When we hit the ground running this year, with the new administration calling their attention to an outgoing administration attempt to redirect millions of dollars from the Outdoor Recreation Legacy Partnership Program. In addition to fighting for that, we are fighting to secure a base level funding increase for that program of $500 million. Stay tuned for more advocacy opportunities. Excellent. Relatedly, we're seeking a short-term waiver. You mentioned, Jody, the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Mm-hmm. We're seeking a short-term waiver of the matching requirement for those stateside projects to really help ease the burden on states and municipalities right now. And again, recognizing that food insecurity that we're facing, we're working actively with the coalition on reauthorization of the Child Nutrition Act, which is important to so many of our agencies. The new administration really must address record level unemployment. And so we're focused on ensuring that workforce development investments benefit Parks and Recreation. In particular, we're actively working in coalition with partners and legislators to advance and unite proposals for what is looking to be a renewed civilian conservation corps, but one that benefits local parks and recreation. Lastly, I would say we're taking steps to ensure that the field of parks and recreation benefits from anything included in future economic stimulus plans. And lastly, I'll just say we've worked in the past to organize together to increase public support for what we do. We must do that again. We must organize ourselves and advocate for our field like never before. And that community wellness hub, that health and wellness solution provider, we believe is a really important and unique opportunity for us.
Absolutely. Kristine, again, you're encapsulating, we are safe havens. We are the gathering places, and we can help in every aspect that you mentioned. Thank you for driving that home and keep leading us that way. Jayne, please make some comments on this.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's interesting. A lot of what Kristine shared that's happening in the US is happening around the rest of the world. There are some unique differences. For example, some of the similarities is, yes, agencies across the world are facing reductions as well, during a time when we had incredible usage of our parks. But one of the differences is that other countries around the world have been much more proactive around lockdowns to get COVID under control. And some of those lockdowns have included closing parks. Lockdowns have also included people only being able to go outside for 2 hours a day to manage the virus spread. So there are some similarities. I'm also going to talk a little bit about what's happening in the field internationally. And again, one of the challenges is that every country's handling things slightly differently. So I'm going to offer some general observations and things that are happening internationally. For those of you who don't know, I actually am going to just take a step back and just introduce myself as the chair of World Urban Parks. Many of you may not be familiar with the organization. It started in 2015 through the consolidation of NACPRO, which was the International Federation for Park and Recreation, and Parks for Life organizations. We went through a 2-year process of looking at whether to consolidate those agencies and create a new organization. And out of that work, World Urban Parks was created and started in 2015. So we really represent the urban park world around the world, and innovative things. And I'll talk a little bit about that later, but I also just wanted to introduce myself and relative to my role with World Urban Parks. But again, from an international perspective, forecasts are showing some of the same things. There's international funding reductions that are ranging from 15 to 30% around the world. There's also every indication worldwide that these reductions are not just now, but they will likely last a good 5 years. So the reductions that Kristine talked about, from a both national perspective but international, we're talking a number of years of significant reductions that we're going to be facing. Because of these reductions and the length of the reductions, internationally, there's an increased interest and awareness of alternative governance and funding models for our field internationally. Many parts of the world that have never looked at alternative governance and funding models really are now starting to do that. Countries like Australia, New Zealand, and they're actually looking to the United States at the different models that we have in the US because of our long history, going back to the 70s in some cases and 80s, where we actually created different funding models and governance models because of the financial challenges we faced back then. Also, these economic changes internationally, coupled with international trends, which I'll talk about a little bit later, have also broad implications for our profession economically. There's an increased interest in self-sufficiency because of the changes in global markets, sanctions, and tariffs that threaten local supplies. There's also an awareness and shift to local production, just as in the US, and city-based food production. Pre-COVID, there was a really a growth of public community gardens that was already happening, but now it's even a greater need to provide and expand community gardens to address the shift to a more local production and local food supplies, and also to address the community food deserts that are experienced around the world. The global pandemic has also internationally highlighted, as Kristine mentioned, the socioeconomic inequality regarding access to basic parks, nature, and recreation around the world. There have been direct and indirect disproportionate impacts on communities which were already experiencing inequality. The culturally and linguistically diverse communities, indigenous communities around the world, minority communities of color, which vary depending on what country you're in, low socioeconomic communities, the aged, disparities based on gender, and the whole casual workforce status communities that we also have in this country, and LGBTQ communities. With COVID-19 not only highlighting, but also accelerating these inequities, there are heightened demands for greater equity and access to public resources, challenging what have been historic access, historic leases and licenses over public land and parks around the globe. And to address these inequities, there will be a significant amount of pressure to shift how our dollars, in fact, our reduced dollars, are allocated. And on a personal and professional level, this is something I have been working on for a long time, that given what our profession is about in terms of serving all, I feel that we have a moral and ethical obligation as a profession to address those spending inequities now rather than later.
Jayne, totally agree. Past director, I can tell you right now, you nailed it. And it is our obligation, all of us. But we have an opportunity to do this, and now it's to the forefront. Also, it's ironic you mentioned about the foreign countries. I have a student in the UK that literally gets on with me on a hybrid model of interaction of teaching, and she gets 1 hour a day of physical activity, and that's it. So in America, we're very fortunate. We can still move around within this country. We're very fortunate.
Right, but the flip side of that, Jody, is countries that have been more aggressive around lockdowns,
That's
many
right.
of them have managed the virus much more effectively than we have in our country. So it's a trade-off, right?
That's exactly right. And you know it, because I think sometimes we don't realize that we're a little bit more active than some of the other countries are very limited on what they're getting to do. Well, let's go ahead and move in, because Jonathan, we want you to lead off this area. What are the key trends? This is a huge area. We have so many people that are wanting to hear about what the lead trends and key trends for our industry and departments, and what should we pay attention to. And Jonathan, you have done a phenomenal scan of our country and national trends. Go for it.
Thanks, Jody. So I'm going to pull out a crystal ball here. That's basically a combination of looking at history, looking at the literature, looking at what I've heard in environmental scan from NACPRO members across the nation, as well as regionally here in the Twin Cities, which is Minneapolis, St. Paul, for folks that are wondering what in the world are the Twin Cities. I want to talk about three things. I want to talk about what are the use levels going to be like in the near term and in the future. I want to talk about what is going to be the legacy, in my mind, of this pandemic. And then last, I want to talk about the county perspective on integration. And I think these will touch on both Jayne and Kristine's points as well. So let's start with use. As we all know, use is up everywhere. It's everything outdoors is super popular now. We're seeing tons of new users on trails in particular, a huge surge in sales of outdoor recreation equipment. Good luck buying a kayak. Good luck buying a new bike. Good luck buying cross-country ski boots. You just can't. And So unless you planned ahead and thought ahead, you're kind of like struggling. And so of course, rentals are up in parks big time. But the big question is this going to last once the pandemic is over? If use is double right now, is it going to be double in 3 years from now? Probably not. And a couple factors are going to affect that. First off, I'm a big believer in equilibrium. I think, I agree with Newton's law that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Right now, getting together with friends, attending large concerts, going to fairs, being around lots of other people, these vibrant social scenes, these are being denied to everybody right now due to the pandemic. And so when there's an artificially low supply of something, the value of it increases. We all want it. I know personally, I'm going to see as many live music concerts as I can as soon as this is done. So the pendulum is going to swing back hard, and we're going to see an interim period of really high demand for social experiences and vibrant social settings in parks. I think trail use is going to fall, and I think beach parties are going to go through the roof. Picnic shelter rentals, get on the list right now. It's going to be hard to get it.
No kidding.
Yep. Well, factoring into that is also the whole concept of carrying capacity. We've seen it on trails this past year. Right now, all of the agencies in the winter areas with snow, we have winter walkers, we have cross-country skiers, all trying to get on the same trails. We have user conflicts, and that's been a problem with crowding. But the pendulum, when it shifts over to the vibrant social scene and the social gatherings in parks, is going to be a bigger problem. Demand is going to exceed supply. There's not going to be enough picnic shelters. There's not going to be enough parking. There's not going to be enough nice bathrooms to accommodate this temporary surge as the pendulum goes way off to the social side. So that results in expectations not being met. That results in use decreasing because the expectations are not being met, and the equilibrium will slowly return. But it's going to return at a higher rate of participation than before. I mean, the delta for use is basically a combination of new visitors plus frequency of existing and new visitors, frequency of visits. What I expect to see happen is that I believe pandemics are a time accelerant, and they've talked a lot about this with regards to work. I think this is also true for parks. What would happen over the next 10 years in parks is going to be compressed into 1 or 2 years. So at Three Rivers, we've seen an average growth rate of 4% a year. I'm not going to say we're going to come out of this with 40% new base, higher level of use. I'm going to be conservative and say that take 5 years of that. So about a 20% increase in use. And so that's my fearless prediction on that one. Pandemics are an agent of change. We know this from history. The cholera pandemics in the 19th century gave rise to our modern sewer system. We didn't have sewers before that. There was a demand and a need, and it created change. The 1918 flu pandemic gave rise to the car, basically. People abandoned the use of trolleys because it wasn't safe to get on trolleys. And with the car came the rise of what are now known as the suburbs. And in both cases, pandemics always tend to impact the poor to a disproportionate degree. So what is the COVID pandemic going to do? Well, in my mind, it's all about decentralization and the work from home movement. Gartner, which is an HR consulting firm, found that 80% of company leaders plan to allow employees to work remotely for at least part of the time, and that nearly half of employers are considering going to work from home full time. This has huge implications. Well, and the workers are into it too. I mean, 65% of the workers that they interviewed want the ability to work remotely full time. Another 31% want the ability to work remotely part time. So this has huge implications. What's going to happen to downtowns? What's going to happen to our retail shopping centers as we go digital? What is going to happen to our transit systems? Downtowns are going to have a huge issue on their hands, and they're going to really need to up their game. and parks are going to be part of that. The transportation network is a really interesting thing. Will our transportation routes that we built pre-pandemic still be viable? I expect that we're going to see the rise of the 15-minute city at nodes throughout the suburbs around the urban core. We're already seeing it with malls being converted into places with high density housing, service centers, and retail. These places are going to really have to up their game as well to bring in more of a vibrant social scene, and they're going to actually compete with parks. And we want our trails to go there. So the third point I wanted to make was the county perspective. And Kristine, you really touched on this quite well. It's all really about integration, and it's about determining new models of how to work. And my approach on this is to try to integrate our system into the other systems so that we can raid their funds. And I'm thinking like trails. Trails, in my mind, are non-motorized transit. And with the 15-minute city concept, with everything being within 15 minutes, trails are the preferred method to actually get places. So I hope to see a rise of recognition at the federal level of non-motorized transportation as actually being a concept of transit, and the transit funding would be available for trails. So that's my crystal ball. Well, I guess we'll find out how close I am in the future.
Hey,
Wow.
Jonathan, thank you so much. I tell you, folks out there in our audience, if you want to see a dynamite plan ahead for the next 20 years, you need to go to the Three Rivers Park District. This is amazing. Jonathan, do you want to say a couple words? You're using a couple of models there, and you're way ahead of the curve.
Sure. Thanks, Jody. Yeah. Staff did a great job of putting this together. And one of the models that I think is really interesting is the visitor experience model. I mean, it starts with lack of awareness going all the way up to love it, so it's learn it, live it, love it. And we've historically in the past been really focused on the high-end users, the folks that are really experienced, because most people in parks are really experienced, and that's who we relate to. What we really need to focus on in the future are creating awareness and introducing new people to the joys of outdoor recreation in natural settings. So this plan calls for a significant investment of programming, as well as creation of mini parks and things like that, where people live, to make them aware and to bring those classes to them so that they can learn these skills. And then if they like it, great, they can come out to our parks and continue. So it's a redirection, refocus from a park-centric notion to a people-centric notion.
Great. I just really listened to that closely, that statement, because I think you're on it. I think it deals with equity. It deals with so many issues out there that we do need to address as communities. Kristine, will you please take away from the national end for us?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I would echo everything that was just said. And in particular, you used the word integration. I think that's that's something we should all be just hanging on to. Because of budget constraints, because of increased demand, we need to be really creative, right? So one of the trends is creativity in the use of our public spaces, and the pandemic has inspired some of this. We find examples with Seattle's Freeway Park, Tom McCall Waterfront Park in Portland, and the upcoming expansion of Union Square Park in New York City. So there's this look at how do we create human-centered designed spaces that enable people to move around to access what they need to access in a safe and human-powered way. So reclaiming public open spaces, reducing or eliminating lanes for vehicle travel in favor of more greenways and more, more safe routes to parks. So I think you're spot on as far as that's concerned. I think the other thing is integrating multi-benefits into our park investments. This widespread movement we've seen around climate has started to translate into more accountability for our electeds, both at the federal and the local level. And so we're going to see much more expectation for and active investment in climate mitigation solutions. And local solutions depend on parks and recreation. So all of the wonderful examples we see across the country and around the world that are about green infrastructure in parks that serve multi-benefits, that clean and manage stormwater, that reduce heat island effect, and frankly, perform more economically than traditional gray infrastructure, that's going to continue to explode. I would say, you know, again, want to emphasize the health and wellness linkages, and to, you know, your point, Jonathan, the really integrating across teams, making sure that we're not just thinking about park and rec in isolation, but we're part of the public health solution for communities, right? I agree that the dramatic increase is probably not to be sustained. However, the impact on chronic health conditions, on obesity, on mental health concerns, we're going to be seeing more and more, you know, the Park RX is not dead. More and more opportunities to be intentionally using parks and recreation as a real prescription solution for these chronic health crises. Not only that, we've got an interesting intergenerational divide, and the demographics that are shifting in our country means that there's a chance for us to, again, be thinking in an integrated way about how we're drawing people into intergenerational programs. So I think that we'll see more creativity in that way. Equity, Jayne, you talked about this. You talked about disproportionate impacts and the moral and ethical imperative that we have to solve for those. That trend in terms of getting our park and rec professionals trained up, getting their cultural competency, getting more meaningful community engagement programs. And we're seeing more and more of this. Many agencies are really taking, like Jonathan, you were talking about, a systemic approach to this, like, you know, looking at your capital budgets, really understanding where investment needs to happen to make the services provided to our communities more meaningful and meet them where they are. So addressing, you know, historical, systemic, social inequities, racial injustices, environmental inequities, and factoring those into our park and recreation master plans and to our day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month program decisions. Shifting gears just a little bit, we got to give a nod to technology and data, of course. The usage, I know, Jonathan, you could speak at length about this. How this field is doing business and how we're interfacing with the public and maintaining our spaces and managing data is only going to increase in terms of complexity. We know that the embracing of technologies to automate, to provide more efficient management, like sensors on track for sensors to inform more efficient trash pickup, looking at how patrons are using parks so that folks can more thoughtfully deploy park staff like park ambassadors. You know, all of those tools that we have at our disposal that provide operational efficiencies and frankly, better patron engagement, those are going to continue to rise, which really puts pressure on this question of data privacy. And park and rec administrators, if they're not already asking this question, they have to be asking, what are we collecting? What are we doing with it? And how do we ensure that it's as secure as possible? And that's something that we're looking at and want to be supportive of. The other, just pulling back on the inequity piece, is the pandemic created yet another divide. It really exacerbated what was already a digital divide. And a lot of park and rec agencies have served as flexible learning hubs in partnership with local schools. We know that 83% of agencies already provide out of school time programming. So it's interesting to think about, with this learning gap that this pandemic has created, how can parks and recreation be part of the solution to help kids, help us close that learning gap through out of school time programming, through providing Wi-Fi hubs and safe spaces for
Yes.
kids to participate in learning. So I think that's another trend that'll be interesting to keep an eye on. And then last, but certainly not least, is the program trends around virtual. That's not going to go away. And what we've seen is super popular and will continue for a long, long time are the take it with you kinds of programs, grab and go kits. People love those. It's a touch point for the community, and it gives people sort of that flexibility to do what they want. Virtual events, competitions, team events, those are continuing to be on the rise, and they're covering a huge array of activities from disc golf to your typical 5K, and they help to bring people together, which is one of our essential functions, right? And then lastly, Jody, you mentioned the NRPA's inaugural 30 under 30 class, which we're so excited about. Look at
Love it.
Look at those sort of key achievements that a lot of those 30 under 30 professionals have spoken to, and it's esports. So esports is not going away. And interestingly enough, a lot of directors are noting that their park and rec agencies' esport activities are really moving to team events. So again, another chance for us to be that glue to provide that social community cohesion through thinking in a more integrated way about how we deliver our services. So anyway, I could go on, but I'm gonna stop there.
Oh, I'm telling you, we're grabbing onto every moment right there, Kristine. I tell you, you really hit something with this hub. Yeah, esports is not going to stop. We're already developing in the universities our esports clubs. So it's flowing into that generation. They're driving it. Thank goodness we have them ahead. But I can tell you right now, going back to the hubs, we have lifestyle centers that came in years ago. And then now you're going to see more and more of the lifestyle activity center, and that's going to keep going. And now you're talking about the next hub. I mean, there are so many pod concept. We all see how the learning pod concept is out there. Some of that will probably continue on those trends. But again, I just applaud you all. The data collection that you all are in the midst at NRPA is unbelievable. I've been around a long time. I've seen us research a lot, but I've never seen what you all are producing. Not sure how you're getting it done, but you could not have stepped up at a bigger time for us in our field. So thank you to you, Kevin Roth, all the staff. It's just literally amazing. So Jayne, we're going to turn to you and take us home on this one because you've got a lot of information for us ahead. Let's go for it.
Thanks, Jody. And, again, I want to reiterate what Jonathan and Kristine said, technology, use of public spaces, human-powered travel, equity, all really critically important. And I also will give a shout out to NRPA, the data that you guys have provided. I know we used a lot of it when I was in Pittsburgh, when we were doing our equity plan to do some comparisons and stuff, really, really valuable. Around the technology piece, before I get into the international scene, I think the inequities around technology are really, really big. And I question whether we as a national organization should be pushing at the federal level that internet should be a public utility.
Yes.
Because it's a huge driver of the inequity. So I can have a conversation with you that later.
Great point.
But I think it's really important. So what I'm going to do is talk about what a number of international megatrends that have implications for our field. Some of these are directly connected to the forecast that I talked about before, but let me just go through them. So the first megatrend, international megatrend, is the shifts that are happening in global economic power. This megatrend is really exacerbated by COVID-19, which, as we all have discussed, is having significant negative financial impacts for park and rec agencies and for nonprofit park conservancies, friends groups, and foundations. As I mentioned earlier, the associated international trends that impact our profession include examining alternative governance and funding models, the sanctions and tariffs that impact local supplies. So those are a lot of the big financial ones. Another mega trend is demographic shifts. Again, Kristine and Jonathan talked about that. These shifts include, as Kristine mentioned, an aging population. It also includes people having fewer children, which is having impacts on the type of green spaces and recreation experiences people value. The demographic shifts also include the development of new tree change demographics and the shift to regional centers. These shifts also include population growth that will drive urbanization, and that population growth, coupled with a high usage of parks during COVID-19, is going to increase demand for open space in the future.
Yes.
It might just look a little bit differently. Associated international trends for our field include the need for enhanced interconnected public realm and the importance of local open space. The new concepts such as hyper-local parks and slowways are really gaining traction as a response to the increased population demands and density and equity concerns. There's also an increased focus on quality and maintenance of our open space networks. As we all have noted, there's been a lot of behavior change because of COVID in our parks, but it's unclear whether that change is going to be permanent or not. Another mega trend is accelerating urbanization, which I talked a little bit about. There is evidence that most of that new growth is going to occur in medium-sized cities, and there's a recognition that open spaces will need to be established and protected in urban areas. There's also been a development of the new tree change demographic movement and a potential shift to regional centers that I mentioned before. It's also, the pandemic has also highlighted and intensified the inequities of public and personal outdoor living spaces related to apartments and social housing. So the trends for our profession as a result of this mega trend is a need for us to move to a more holistic public realm concept of interconnected environmental infrastructure, addressing inequities to access to public spaces. Also the public's expectation of closer proximity to open space should another pandemic occur or this one continues for a longer period of time. As Jonathan mentioned, there's a rapid adoption extension of the 10, 20, 30-minute neighborhood concept, which means that everybody lives within a 10-minute walk to a park, safe, accessible walk, and that everyone can access their basic needs within a 20-minute walk. And that the goal of this is to have these incorporated in existing cities and the new way of planning and creating new communities globally by 2030. Another international mega trend, again, as was mentioned, is the rise of technology and the digital revolution. It's demonstrated again by more online shopping, reduced visitation to physical shops and shopping centers. It's obviously having a significant impact on shopping malls and reduced vitality, but maybe this is an opportunity for the public realm to look at these spaces and how they're used from a public perspective. The pandemic has also seen a rapid, obviously, adoption of technology and work from home or work from anywhere, really. And the adoption of technological breakthroughs is changing our behaviors, expectations, and delivery of services and experiences. It's also accelerating the adoption of smart city concepts. And for Parks and Recreation, the dramatically changed work-life arrangements with significantly more people working from home or in local clusters is resulting in an increased demand for functional environmental infrastructure close to home. The rise of smart city technology to create no-touch, safe zones, and safe physical infrastructure that will influence mobility in and use of environmental infrastructure is also really critical around the world. Another mega trend, again, which Jonathan and Kristine talked about, is climate change and resource scarcity. there still is a major issue that the global pandemic did not impact, and that's the long-term irreversible environmental changes that are expected from predicted temperature increases beyond 2 degrees Celsius, or in our case, 36 degrees Fahrenheit. The pandemic has made societies more aware of the finite amount of natural resources to satisfy demands for energy, food, and water. And the international trends for our field include an awareness and a shift to local production and city-based food production, shifts to active transportation modes, motivated by, again, climate, resources, economic, and health factors at the city and individual level. And finally, the last mega trend I want to share is the emergence of public opinion as a revolutionary force. As mentioned before, the pandemic has put a huge spotlight on inequities in many communities and has enabled the consequences of those inequities to be really, really apparent. The Black Lives Matter movement, not just in the United States, but around the world, has really shown how quickly public opinion can shift. And for our field, the trends are that the global pandemic has highlighted the socioeconomic inequalities regarding access to basic parks, nature, and recreation, and that the direct and indirect disproportionate impacts on communities already experiencing inequities will accelerate the demands for greater equity and access to those spaces, historic uses, leases, licenses of public land and parks. It has also led to the acceleration around the world of Aboriginal self-determination and treaties for traditional owners around the world linked to the health of communities and especially elders. So that's what's happening around the world. That's much of what's happening here in the US.
Amazing. I'm going to just
Wow.
jump in, Jody, and say thank you so much, Jayne, Jonathan, Anne Marie. Jody, I have to jump off for the NACPRO board meeting. It was an honor to be with all of you. I learned so much and really appreciate all of you very much. So enjoy the rest of the show.
Thanks, Kristine.
Thanks, Kristine.
Kristine, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
we'll have a future date with Kristine again, because I'll tell you, there is a lot going on. Jayne, I got to tell you, what you and Jonathan and Kristine are talking about, you know, I've talked about it's at times not bad to take a pause. And I think in this time in our world and our lives and our generations, I think we're on to some great times ahead. And I'm not just doing that because of Good News in Parks. I just feel like it has had an effect to recalibrate us. And so I share that with you because what you've talked about today is helping so many people. There are several hundred professionals on today, several hundred. So you're touching small rural all the way to that urban professional. And everything you have said, I've really got to digest it. I've got to go back and really think through this. And, you know, everybody out there, just know this is on demand, but this is going into a podcast. And we have several thousand looking at the podcast every episode. This one you don't want to miss. I like the other ones, but you don't want to miss because you all have brought forward some amazing trends. Anne Marie, we're going to switch it over to our audience. They're now in control. It's all yours.
All right, that sounds good. We always like to have a couple of poll questions, but before we do that, I just wanted to share, we've had several comments of folks asking Jonathan about the 2040 plan for Three Rivers. So I took the liberty of looking up that link, and it's in the Q&A answered questions section. So if you're interested in looking at that plan that Jonathan mentioned, that information is there. So let's go ahead and launch our first poll. And you guys have heard a lot about different trends, and you know, we've heard from some of you that you're really questioning a lot of the planning that you have in place. So what we would like to know, this is a multiple choice question, is given the current pandemic and resulting trends, which of the following will you be developing to assist in planning for the future? A comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, a system-wide park assessment to identify needs, collecting surveys or community feedback on unmet needs, an ADA audit to improve accessibility of parks and features, a new master plan, surveying other communities for partnership opportunities, intentionally including a diversity equity lens, or we aren't developing any new guidance documents at this time. So I see a lot of voting going on, some really interesting thoughts behind this question, because again, it's, even though there's master plans and outdoor recreation plans in place with COVID and all of the different things that have been happening in the country and around the world lately, a lot of departments are sort of questioning if what they have in place right now is actually going to serve them into the future, and kind of taking a look at some additional ways to either get public opinion from folks or to redo a common, like a master plan or recreation plan that's already in place. So I see a couple of you voting. We're going to give it about 5 more seconds here. 4, 3, 2, 1. And let's end the poll and share the results with you all. So collecting surveys and community feedback on unmet needs. Number 1, and that's a great idea, and I think especially given what some of our panelists have said today, with folks are speaking their minds about what they want and what they're looking for, and so I think that's fantastic. But some really good responses there across the board. So we have one more poll question for you before we move on to our last question. And I'll remind you too to go ahead and use that Q&A. If you have some other questions for our audience, we'd like to get to as many of those as we can. Poll question number 2. And again, this is also a multiple choice. Given the current climate, what are your biggest challenges from a departmental view over the next 6 months? Is it juggling daily operations while implementing pandemic health and safety guidelines? Is it monitoring and planning future budget revenues and expenditures? Is it staff development, retainment, and morale, or a combination of those 3? Having staff vaccinated, staying engaged with your park customers and user groups, or ensuring that we are meeting the needs of the community at large? So again, a lot of thoughtful questions there, and certainly a lot of things that are top of mind with park departments around the country and around the world, as we face brand new challenges that have not necessarily been a challenge. I mean, who would have thought 2 years ago that we would even be asking some of these questions, but certainly top of mind right now. So we're going to give you guys again about 5 more seconds. I see the voting's kind of slowing down. 4, 3, 2, 1. And let's share those results with you as well. So ensuring that we're meeting the needs of the community at large, obviously, and that goes really well with the last poll question about polling everybody. But it's interesting, there's a pretty even spread through a lot of those, showing that certainly all of these are top of mind for some departments as we continue to navigate this pandemic. So thank you for that. Just wanted to mention a couple of just comments that our audience has made before we move on that I think are really telling. One, a lot of the conversations that you panelists have said, one of our attendees said, really supports the role of a recreational therapist in the community setting. So that's kind of a very interesting observation. And then this is interesting from Mark out in the audience, who said that climate change adaptation is a growing issue, of course. Park districts and school districts can partner to provide education and service learning projects that can use outdoor classrooms, as in parks and other outdoor spaces. The Climate Change Education Act, if passed by Congress, will provide teacher and outdoor educator training as well as grants. And what a great way to partner with schools, with schools looking for things like, green schoolyards and how to get kids outdoors more in the curriculum, and parks being able to perhaps, help in providing that service. There's obviously some really good partnership opportunities there. So thanks for that comment, Mark. Go ahead, Jody. We'll go to our last question and then hopefully get to some more of our audience questions at the end.
Well, I tell you what, these organizations are our leaders, and we have needed you. You've stepped up. It's very obvious you're on the cutting edge of what's ahead of us. But let's go ahead and let's dive into Jayne, on the world scene. You need to go ahead and let people what's ahead. You all have some dynamic plans ahead, and please share with our audience what World Urban Parks is doing. Oh, you're on mute.
Yep, I apologize. That's the comment of 2020. Yes, exactly. So again, I just want to thank you and Anne Marie for having me, actually having World Urban Parks on the show today, and for me to be able to represent them. So thank you again. As I mentioned earlier, World Urban Parks was created in 2015 from the International Federation of Parks and Recreation Administration, or IFPRA, and Parks for Life. World Urban Park's mission is to promote and support the provision of effective management and use of urban parks, open space, and recreation worldwide as an integral contribution to healthy communities connected to the natural world. We have members on 6 continents. Our members include cities, actually state governments, national and local nonprofits, businesses, universities, and community groups. We have a number of programs and events, and today I'm just going to focus on 2 of them. One is National Park Cities and Emerging Urban Leaders Cohort Program, both of which I think when I talk about it are really, really reflective of what's happening around the world. The National Park Cities movement is a movement growing and drawing people together who want to make their cities greener, healthier, wilder, fairer, and more beautiful. All kinds of people are involved: cyclists, scientists, students, underemployed, doctors, parents. I think you get it, everybody. It's really a groundswell movement. And the National Park Cities is really putting the concept of parks on its head. Instead of simply looking at parks and park systems, the National Park Cities movement is looking at cities in their totality to make them greener, healthier, wilder. Put green gardens along high rises so when you look out, you see green. More tree plantings throughout cities, creating more walking, biking connections. Looking at building codes to make them more environmentally sustainable. Connecting destinations through parks, green pockets, trails, fostering wildlife in cities. In 2019, London became the first national park city, and our goal at World Urban Parks, in partnership with National Park City, is to have 25 national park cities around the world by 2025. The second program I want to share with you is the Emerging Urban Leaders Cohort Program, which we launched at the World Urban Parks Congress in November. The program is a partnership between World Urban Parks and Salzburg Global Seminar, and is designed to provide thought leadership and safe spaces for emerging urban leaders and to collectively advance critical urban parks work. The program is looking at emerging leaders really from a different lens. It's not just about young professionals. It may be professionals transitioning to urban parks work, or professionals already in the urban parks field who have an innovative idea that they just can't seem to launch. So the program is providing the opportunities for professionals who have an innovative urban park idea with the time, space, and connections to peers and other international leaders to help make their idea a reality. Cohort members will serve as co-incubators of innovative work accelerating the UN Sustainable Development Goals through urban parks work. The goal of the program is to actually have a cohort representation with gender balance and equitable distribution based on the world urban park regions, such as Africa, the Asia Pacific region, South and Central America, Eastern Europe, North America, and Western Europe. Again, the program will include 2-hour monthly working meetings with the cohort and international speakers, opportunities to engage with World Urban Parks and develop leadership opportunities where interest aligns within World Urban Parks. The cohort fellows will co-create programs by providing public speaking, writing articles, creating web pages or social media for upcoming World Urban Parks Congresses, Salzburg Global Seminars, or other relevant international events. And each cohort fellow will be partnered with a professional international mentor. The 12-month program begins this March. And here's the kicker for those of you who may be interested. The deadline for applications for this year's cohort is tomorrow, Friday, 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So what I encourage you to do is go to our website, which is wup.imiscloud.com, to check out these 2 programs and other work. And if you're interested in the Emerging Urban Leaders Cohort Program and have the time to pull together an online application, it's listed under programs on our website. And again, our website address is wup.imiscloud.com.
I wanted you to talk about this, Jayne. We needed this. We've been waiting for a program of this scale. Don't underestimate your capabilities, professionals. Get out there, apply, get some caffeine, make it happen. You can do this. You can do this. And so I just want to turn it over now. Let's move to NACPRO. I've been with the board. I've been with this organization, a great organization. And also, Jonathan, you have the task of intertwining with the National Association of County Officials. So take it away on NACPRO.
All right, thank you. Jayne, I just wanted to say that it's such a cool program. And
yes.
And
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I love the work that you do. Thank you so much. NACPRO, National Association of County Park and Rec Officials. I'm on the board. NACPRO is a county, regional, and special park district directors and senior staff from across America are members. We have 119 agencies who are members. We cover 33 different states. We have 27 of our members are CAPRA accredited, and it's a small organization. Right now, there's about 225 actual members of it. And that's one of the things I love about it. Because it's small, yet it's at the executive level, it's a really excellent place for peer networking.
Yeah.
I mean, we are routinely reaching out to each other, asking questions. That environmental scan, I couldn't have done it without the help of the other NACPRO members. It's great. It's a great place to bounce ideas off of each other and to share information. It's really the greatest strength of NACPRO. I, of course, also want to give out a big shout out of appreciation to Brenda Adams-Wyant, the executive director of NACPRO. She keeps our members informed with a curated news, research, technical report, training opportunities, and job openings through a bi-weekly newsletter. I love getting it in my email inbox. It's really fun to read, and there's always some really interesting clickable ideas in there. We do have a job board as well that goes out to 1,100 different agencies whenever we have jobs posting. And we have an awards program for national level awards for programming, for capital development, for fellows, and a bunch of different things. And that is open right now. So I encourage you to go to the NACPRO website. And if you see something you like, you do have to be a member. So maybe you should sign up and
that's right.
join NACPRO. That'd be great to have you aboard. It's a really fun organization. With that said, I'm also the affiliate to NACO, the National Association of Counties, and I just started this in December, so I'm still getting my head around it all. But NACO is considered part of the Big Seven, the group of organizations that represent local and state governments in the United States. They're a particularly good way to get your voice heard at the federal level. And NACPRO works with NACO to influence the legislative agenda. And we also work with NRPA to do that as well. And we look at it through the lens of, again, county, regional, and special park districts, and what could help us do a better job of serving the public. So I'm new to NACO. I'm having fun with it. I'm getting to know the people. What I'm really looking for is, in addition to helping with the legislative platform development, I really want to use it as an opportunity to help educate county board members about parks and about regionalism, about integration, and about the role parks play in all of the different facets and departments within county organizations. I sometimes feel that parks is sort of a stepchild, and it shouldn't be that way. Really, it's foundational for all of the other departments. And so I really hope to be able to use my position there as to be a voice and an advocate for parks across America.
Jonathan, your experience of over 30 some years in the field is so important right now. And you will with your regional and your dynamic department experience too, you will be able to carry the torch for the counties and the regional and really all park systems. So thank you for doing this. Again, Jayne and Jonathan, you're stepping up, and we needed you so badly for our field. So I just want to say thank you so much. But Jayne, thank you for exposing me speaking at the World Urban parks. Now it's in my heart, and thank goodness that was there. But we had to come back to NACPRO and get you on, and of course NRPA. Anne Marie, I'm going to turn it over to you. We've got some questions out there.
We do. And I absolutely love this one because we're going to give you a chance to share some of your good news, Jayne and Jonathan. You talked about creativity. Can you both share an example of your most favorite or pleasantly surprising example of the most simple actions you see unfolding in 2021 to better serve communities during this unique time?
Ooh.
Great question.
And it's open
Sure.
and live.
We were lucky enough to, Hennepin County is our home county where our park district is, though we're not directly affiliated with them. We're our own special park district. The county reached out to us last summer, and they wanted to save the summer for kids. And it was really kind of, how do you want to do that? And they said, well, we got all this PPE money and COVID money. And since we don't have a parks department, what can you folks do? And we said, well, let's take it to the cities, as in particular, our more older, developing, more diverse cities, and ask them what they can do if we could provide them funding for programs in particular. And we had 11 cities participate. We had over $1 million of funding going to programs, and over 50,000 kids benefited from the program. And
Wow.
we kind of displayed the role of administrator, but the creativity at the local level in this case was just fabulous, and it really ran the gamut of many of the things that we talked about, from virtual and take-home kits, the virtual experiences, as well as a lot of teaching kids how to fish, giving kids fishing poles. We bought fishing poles with pandemic money because it qualified. I hope. And so it was cool. And I thought that was very creative. And creativity comes from getting many people together to say, how do we solve this problem?
Jayne?
So my answer is going to be a twofold answer because many of you know I ran the Minneapolis Park System, which is a neighbor to Three Rivers. And one of the things I was really impressed with what they did, and Kristine talked about, was pack and go opportunities they would provide. They would just put things out in the parks for people to get, whether it was a football or hockey sticks, because we have so many hockey rinks, or snowshoes, and people could just pick them up and go, and it was an honor system. So again, a very simple thing to do, but really makes a difference for people's use and ability to get outside and enjoy nature. I have shifted my professional career from running agencies to now doing consulting. And what really drove me to do that was the equity work that I did in Minneapolis and in Pittsburgh, developing equitable investment strategies for both systems, and getting a call from a colleague of mine in another city saying, hey, I want to hire you to do this work for us. And I had been toying with it, but for me, the issue of equity is first and foremost for me to help cities and agencies develop equitable investment strategies, help them figure out how to do it, because I think it is absolutely probably the most important thing that we as public park and rec agencies have to do today, is to change our history and ensure that we are making our investments equitably across the communities we serve.
Jayne, this is interesting, both you and Jonathan. I tell you, Jayne, thank goodness you released and came to the outside, because we needed you for access to you. And thank goodness you've done that. Thank you very much for opening up your time to do this. Jonathan, as you talked about too, we're going back to basics in so many ways, and there is nothing wrong with that. And that's where it's touch. It's where it's giving that access on the most basic, putting those packs out or anything like that to our people. Just so basic. It's wonderful. Back to you, Anne Marie. I know you have more. Oh, you're on mute. Anne Marie? you're on mute.
Oh, there's that live component again. We are actually at time, and I cannot believe how fast this one
Oh my God.
went. But I want to go ahead and just share who we're going to have on our next show, which is February 11th at 1 o'clock Eastern. Vision and Tenacity is the title. And look at these folks. We have Homer Garcia, who's the director of the City of San Antonio Park and Rec. Bob Belote, who is the director of Springfield Greene County. I know Jody's close and near and dear to your heart, Springfield Greene County Park Board, and Mitchell Silver, the Commissioner of New York Department of Park and Recreation. So another fabulous panel. And I just got to end by thanking you guys and Kristine. I mean, thank you so much.
Unbelievable.
On the show. I've learned so much. I learn so much every episode. Hopefully our audience, they keep showing up. So we're going to assume that they're learning a lot too. And just thank you so much for your time. Jody, take us out.
Well, I just tell you, dear friends, thank you so much for being on this. We have a lot to do ahead of us, but we are in this together. This show is us, and it is our live voice, uncensored. And there will be more ahead, so stay tuned. And audience, keep giving us, friends and professionals, cohorts, please keep giving us topics. This is all coming from you.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you again. And we will see you. We'll see you on February 11th. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.